two worlds together. There's so much animosity and hostility here between those groups, between the Brits, well, not Brits, but I'll just say indigenous Brits, for lack of a better term, and the Muslim population. And the rape gangs, it really did sort of start this schism between the two. And it just keeps on getting worse and even more polarized. I guess a part of it is that the governments covered it up, and there was repeated instances of where they could have brought it to light, but they covered it up. And lots of people on the right said it's because they favored the Muslim population here. And they sort of really made those on the right really resentful about the government and towards the Islamic population. And as you said, we went to the Tommy Robinson March, and we could visibly, very tangibly see the effects of all of this. And I guess I just want to bridge the gap and just understand how we can uncover the truth about Islam instead of using these very extreme examples. And even when you say you're anti-Islam or you don't want Islam here, what does that mean? Do you mean the people? Do you mean you don't want mosques here? And also, there is the rise of Sharia courts here, and people are quite alarmed. So, do you just not want, and it's not forced, it's not integrated into the legal framework of the UK, but I think it's just for those communities who, I think, with disputes over marriages and whatnot, they have to go to a Sharia court to sort it out. So, I don't have to ever go to a Sharia court, or the normal British bloke wouldn't have to, but for those communities, it's there for them. So it's just clarify, what do you even mean by anti-Islam? It's still not very clear. And there's just so many things that I think needed to be uncovered and clarified for people.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I don't live there. So I go to Britain, quite often. But on the question of the rape gangs, I mean, that's something that you'd be able to find the data, in terms of sorting that through. What I can say is following Britain for decades, but also following European countries. And if you go to bridge.georgetown.edu, you'll see we have we cover the issue of Islamophobia for the last 10 years with all kinds of examples. The reality of it is that some of the examples that you were just giving now, fear of Sharia, etc. This has been out there for, people don't even know what they're talking about. The religious law is not necessarily dangerous, whether it's Jewish law or it's Christian law. And Christianity has laws with regard to marriage and divorce, etc. At least a number of, Christian churches, would have that, and certainly Catholicism has had it, and that's, it's not for the state to, to interfere, with that. When I was married, I was married in a Catholic church, and you had Catholic documentation, etc. And then that was worked out with the government, and that was acceptable. It wasn't as if somebody said, well, this is a Catholic marriage, and no, there should be a secular ceremony, and we're not going to, allow for that Catholic ceremony. And the concern about Sharia, most of the time, actually, I did a book called What Everyone Needs to Know About Sharia that Oxford University Press published. And the fact is, you do have Islamic law or Sharia law, and as in other religions, you have laws. And very often, there's a kind of blind accusation that this is going to be imposed on the country. We had this back around the time when President Trump ran for his first presidency, and even a bit before that. You had people, saying that Sharia was going to be imposed in this country. Most of the people didn't even know what Sharia was. That is, the people that were saying this, the government officials that were saying this, they didn't know what it was. And there's no reason why somebody who is a believer, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, cannot they can live in a secular state in
mm,
which there can be uh, parts of their faith that for them are important in
mm,
terms of how they marry, and whom they marry, or how they dress, how they choose to dress, etc. Uh, and a lot of what is said, this kind of anti-Sharia, uh, which spread it increasingly a couple of decades ago in the United States, was just set off by a number of super right-wing anti-Muslim groups, along with prominent right-wing politicians, who would then imply that this was going to take over. You see, and, and then that leads to people being even more upset if one decides that a woman wants to dress from her perspective more Islamically and chooses to wear a veil or to wear a longer outfit or whatever. And I think that once you demonize a religion, uh, then everything becomes possible.
mm,
Every rumor becomes possible, or everything that is done becomes possible. You know, um, a minor kind of a silly little example was when I was a kid. In my parents' generation, you married another Italian, and that would have meant Italian Catholic at the time. And I can remember my grandmother pointing out when we'd have like a Christmas celebration, and there would be five members of my father's family there, etc. But my grandmother pointing out and pointing to my aunt Kitty and saying, "See what they're like? Notice how she's drinking, right?" Now, the guys were drinking, her husband was drinking, but this was, you know, and it was a stereotype, that all Irish people or that most Irish people drink or that etc. And I find that sometimes that's the kind of attitude that occurs, for example, with a woman wearing a hijab. Look at the professional women in the UK, and many of them I know, and the professional women I know in the US, in all kinds of professions, who wear a headscarf.
mm,
And they can graduate from the best universities or hold terrific positions, but your your Tommy Robinson, etc., will see this as a dangerous and offensive, you know, uh, situation, you know. And I think that that's what we see at times, and it exists in French culture. I can remember a member of the royal family from one of the countries in the Gulf used to go to a very expensive restaurant, and the person who was also a senior member in the government of this Arab country. But all of a sudden, when the veil became an issue, was shocked when they were leaving, and the hostess said, and was kind of apologizing, but kind of said, "I'm afraid, you know, in the future we won't admit a woman who's wearing a headscarf."
mm,
I mean, this kind of, or the concern about a Muslim women having a bathing suit that was okay for them, and there was a whole to do in France, and then we've even had issues when it comes to the Olympics and how Muslim women, should or shouldn't dress. This is absurd.
mm,
I mean, it's just, I mean, it is, you know, but the fact that we're still talking that way means that although our countries, European countries and certainly America like to think, certainly when I was growing up, etc., that, here we were the countries that had developed in the 20th century into progressive, pluralistic, open societies. Okay. Well, how open are we when you look at the level of violence and discrimination that occurs, not only uh, in the UK, but in Austria, uh, Germany, as I said, you can go right across the board, you know, uh, and and here we're talking about at times where government is intervening. Okay, let alone when you get into the question of violence being done. How do you legitimate the kinds of rhetoric, the rhetoric of a Tommy Robinson and others? It's a rhetoric that provokes. It not only distorts what the reality is, it provokes. Or what people do is, if you do have a member of a particular religion or whatever, and they do something that is violent or against things, they say, see what they're like, you know,
Mm.
or militant. I remember when I first went to the Middle East, to the Middle East Center for Arab Studies, which was a British training camp in Lebanon for their diplomats. But they also had outsiders that would go. The fellow that picked me up was really very nice. He was British. But as we were driving, he said, "Now be careful with these Lebanese drivers because they're very aggressive. And the fact is, you want to really be careful because they just may, stop and pull out a gun and shoot you."
Oh dear. Mm.
Stereotype. It's
Mm.
just, simply, you know, a stereotype. And I think that that's, if you really take a look at